All right, thanks everybody. Hi, for those of you I don't know, Derek Knopf. I handle local government and community affairs for Consumers Energy here in Southwest Michigan. So if you ever need anything from us, please feel free to reach out to me, both on the technical side, right, with all the things, streetlights and projects and all of our facilities, over to our philanthropic side and our community support that we do all over the state of Michigan. So the big thing I wanted, my short little PSA today is about solar and renewable energy. Shelley touched on it a little bit, and this to me coincides with economic development, but I can tell you, so we have a clean energy plan. We're going to build 8,000 megawatts of solar in the state of Michigan, okay? Whether you like it or not and how you feel about solar, it's coming. I promise you, it is coming, okay? Just in the past couple months, I've been in talks on projects right here in Southwest Michigan, from a couple hundred acres to a couple thousand acres, okay? These projects are coming, I promise you. So, you know, in the last presentation, there was a little bit about looking at your zoning. If you're thinking about economic development, if you haven't looked at solar, maybe a good time too. If you haven't cracked that piece of the zoning book on solar, you know, some of them are just designed with rooftop and small projects in mind. And ultimately, it's up to you. Do you want the big projects? Do you want the tax base and all that comes along with it? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But I am happy to come talk to anybody. There's some information in the back there, a handout. I'll make sure my card's in the back, but I'm happy to follow up with anybody if it's something that you're interested in and thinking about how to set yourself up for it. All I can say is I promise you it's coming, okay? So that's my little 2 cents for this morning, and I appreciate you allowing me to do that. And we're happy to be a sponsor today. So I also get to introduce David Stegink. David is with Envirologic, the Vice President and Manager of Redevelopment Services. So fantastic company. I've dealt with them, in my economic development role that Zach mentioned previously. We're well aware of them. They're a great company here in Southwest Michigan. So David serves as Envirologic VP Manager of Redevelopment Services and has for 37 years. He has 37 years of environmental related experience. He joined Envirologic in 1991 and since has managed many of Envirologic's environmental due diligence and brownfield redevelopment projects. His expertise includes transactional environmental liability, brownfield redevelopment programs, property assessments, including phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments, baseline environmental assessments, hazardous waste management, underground storage tanks, stormwater management, environmental training, and environmental policy and regulations. It's pretty impressive. David is skilled at developing plans and strategies for site redevelopment, securing financial assistance from a variety of sources and implementing these financial strategies. He's adept at communicating technical information to the public and engaging diverse entities in the redevelopment process. He graduated from Hope College with a Bachelor of Science in Chemistry and Biology. He's also accredited asbestos building inspector through the state of Michigan and a certified stormwater operator for industrial sites. He currently serves on the board of directors for the West Michigan chapter of the Air and Waste Management Association. So please welcome David.
Good morning. You hear me all right? That's a handsome guy there. You can see I've been working on my hairstyle a little bit. So thank you for being here and coming out in the snow to talk about brownfield redevelopment, something I'm very passionate about. So I think Justin set us up very well with economic development overview. And now we're kind of going to get into the weeds a little bit about how to do some of this and some of the specific tools that we can all use to make projects happen that have challenges. So what is brownfield redevelopment? And what are brownfields? I'm curious, when I say brownfields, is that a term that's new to anybody? You've all heard it by now. It's in our vernacular, I think, and as leaders and economic developers. When I say brownfields, is that what you think of? Right there, old factory, chain link fence around it that's fallen down, it's all rusty, the windows are all broken, kids go in there and paint graffiti. Is that what you're thinking about? Yeah, well, that's only part of the story. So if there's nothing else that I can teach you today, is that there's a lot more to brownfield redevelopment than this, because some of you might be going, well, I don't have any of that in my community. And you'd be missing the boat on the opportunities that are bound to use these brownfield redevelopment incentives on just about any project. So EPA has a definition of brownfields. I think I have it here. I might have had my slide out of order. Michigan has been kind of a leader in brownfield redevelopment, started in the early to mid 1990s. And here in Michigan, we created a statute for brownfield redevelopment financing in 1996. And we brought a whole bunch of properties into this brownfield redevelopment arena. We have what we call facilities. These are contaminated properties. That's clearly where a lot of the noise and the marketing and the discussions have been over contaminated properties. But ever since the beginning of this program, we have also had properties that are functionally obsolete, blighted, and then we've grown it over the years. So functionally obsolete, what is that? So think about maybe a small manufacturing building constructed in the 60s or 70s even. Low ceiling heights, a lot of posts in the middle. It's not functional anymore for modern manufacturing. Maybe it lacks adequate power. How many of you have an old elementary school building that's vacant right now in your community? Everyone? It's not functional for anything else, right? It's not functional as an elementary school either. So those are properties that they're eligible to be enrolled into these brownfield incentives. Blighted, kind of what it sounds like. It's not a great picture from this view, but buildings that are falling apart, falling down, power and such has been disconnected from it permanently. So those are eligible properties. Over the years, this brownfield redevelopment program that we're going to talk about has been so successful that our state legislators have continued to build upon it, reinforce it, and reinvigorate it. Several years ago, the state historic preservation tax credit temporarily went away. The legislature said, well, let's make those historic properties eligible for brownfield incentives. Nice that now the state historic preservation tax credit's back, but those are also properties. So you can see here, I'm just picking on 4 of the major categories of what are eligible properties for this program, and only one of them deals with contaminated sites. So I think that's a real important thing for you to recognize, that this is not really just an environmental program, maybe not even mostly an environmental program. It is an economic development program. It's a community development program. So let's talk about, well, what's the redevelopment of brownfields? Obviously, it's the process of cleaning up, restoring value into property that's not attaining its full value or its full worthwhile. there are, this is nationwide, right? I know here in the Rust Belt, this was, kind of where everything got started, but across the country, there's at least 425,000 brownfields throughout the US. State of Michigan currently has 43,000-ish on their list, and that list is growing daily. Why we have this program is because when a developer comes to look at this property that's blighted, it's functionally obsolete, it's contaminated, there's going to be challenges to making that project work. There's going to be added cost. Either they have to demolish blighted structures, get rid of asbestos, get rid of chemicals that have been abandoned. Maybe they have to do some environmental cleanup. Maybe they have to run infrastructure into this property that does not exist right now. Get rid of junk, get rid of debris, fix things up before they can even begin to build their project. They got to fix all this stuff, right? And it adds cost. It's a deterrent to developing these kinds of properties. And this program is intended to try to overcome those redevelopment challenges. We'll talk about how in just a sec. Benefits are pretty obvious, I think. If these properties are restored, you've eliminated blight, something that maybe you're not proud of looking at every day. You've created taxable value, so you've created tax income for local units of government. You've perhaps helped a business expand or relocate to your area, brought jobs, brought incomes. Maybe there's a neighborhood improvement component to this. Justin brought up the public infrastructure issues and those improvements. I'll explain a project here where public infrastructure becomes part of that project. And maybe it serves others beyond the business that's fixing up this particular property. So there's a lot of benefits. As a consultant, as somebody that helps both businesses and local units of government deal with this, I think this is an important part of our work to demonstrate those benefits so that local leaders, elected officials can all rally behind it and know that they're getting something in return for the public support. So how are we going to go about this? So what you'll probably do is manage most of this work through a government entity called a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. Zach mentioned it this morning that both Cass and Van Buren counties each have Brownfield Redevelopment Authorities. So does the city of South Haven, city of Dowagiac, Bangor, and I think South Haven Township, Charter Township. Might be missing one. These are authorities established under what I'll probably refer to as Act 381, the Brownfield Redevelopment Financing Act. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? This is the act that creates the rules of engagement for how to do brownfield redevelopment. And most of that work is going to be managed by a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, which is staffed usually by either the local unit of government or, in this case, an economic development agency as a subcontractor, so to speak. It has a board of directors that vet projects and make decisions about funding. So it's not Zach and his castle making decisions. It's out there in the public eye. The authority meetings are subject to the Open Meetings Act, and folks are encouraged to attend and provide input. So what do these authorities do? There's really three tools I want to talk about this morning. providing direct financing. Talk about that just a little bit. Brownfield plans and tax increment, talk about that quite a bit. And then securing grants and loans through federal and state programs. Tax increment financing is where I want to start. And actually, I'm going to hop ahead a little bit. So tax increment financing, just to make sure we understand what this is, you've got a property, it's yucky, it's ugly, it's contaminated, it's abandoned, nobody's using it, it's got low value, right? And your assessor values that property low, nobody's using it. Some business or developer, or even you, a local unit of government, come in, say, I want to build something here. I want to do something. Maybe you're adding on, maybe you're renovating, maybe you're demolishing and starting over. As you build this new thing, you created an improved property, a property that's going to have a higher taxable value, right? And the dollars created, the tax dollars created from the new development is the increment. So in this thing, you got a little tiny greenhouse and then a nice big green house. And the dollars that were generated in taxes from the little house has a value. The improved property has a much higher tax bill every year. And instead of those taxes running off to the county, the city, the village, the township, the library, the fire department, 911, ISD, school operating, SET, they're captured by the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. They're intercepted from the flow of tax dollars out to the different taxing jurisdictions. And the authority then manages those funds and uses them to reimburse people, developers, local units of government for certain costs. So that's what tax increment financing is. And those are managed through a thing called a Brownfield Redevelopment Plan. I suspect some of you, I know, young lady I'm sitting with is with a DDA. And so if you're familiar with how a DDA works, this is the same kind of thing, only just for one property. So you have an initial taxable value, you have a projected future value after development, you've projected what kind of taxes are going to come out of that, and you can use that money to reimburse for what we call eligible activities. So what kind of things can we pay for? I hope you have picked up a copy of a spreadsheet that I printed out for you. It's a spreadsheet that we use, and it lists all the eligible activities available under the statute. I'm not going to read them all today, but I point that to your direction as a very valuable tool to help you understand what you can pay for on these projects. Certainly anything environmental is eligible. Demolition, asbestos abatement, no matter where your site is or how it qualifies, those are eligible activities. In what we call our core communities, which I think is Hartford and Dowagiac. Am I missing one maybe? Think not. I think those are the two here. In those core communities, there are some additional things that you can do. Site preparation, which is a pretty nice little benefit. All the land clearing, balancing, getting the site shovel ready, that whole effort, all the engineering, all the architect, or not so much architecture, but civil engineering work to prep a property for development is eligible for reimbursement. Public infrastructure improvements are eligible for reimbursement. We have land banks up there. I'm going to talk about land banks later this morning and how that can factor into things. So we're going to use dollars to reimburse somebody for these costs. I will note we can layer these with other incentives. We'll talk about that. There's a term limit to this program. You can do up to 30 years of tax increment capture and disbursement. That's a long time. Not every community is up for a 30-year term on things. A lot of folks are a little bit more comfortable with kind of a 12, 15, 18-year payback term. One of the benefits of to a local unit of government, though, is both during the term of the Brownfield plan and or after you've reimbursed a developer, there's a fund that you can create called a local Brownfield revolving fund. And that is additional dollars that you put into a local fund that can then be revolved and used to fund other brownfield projects in your community. And it's a way of doing business on a continuous basis. Here in Van Buren County, Envirologic, over a decade and a half, has helped the county secure EPA grant dollars to do some of this kind of advanced work. Those are highly competitive grants. You can't count on that kind of funding source to do your business. So to be sustainable, it's important to have some of that local brownfield dollars under your own control. So we kind of went through these. These are the eligible activities: environmental, demo, and asbestos abatement anywhere, site prep and public infrastructure in your core communities or your land bank properties, preparation of the brownfield plans, and then implementation of them and the administrative costs of the authority. You're managing this activity. We're going to walk you through how it works real quick. Takes staff, takes time. People have to be involved in this. You as local units of government can capture your cost out of this stream of new taxes. What is a brownfield plan? It is a document. It has to be adopted by the local unit of government, has to be supported by a Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. It documents what the project is, what the initial value is, what the future estimates are, the projected flow of tax revenues, and all nice fancy Excel spreadsheets. They're so fun to look at. It should also show the public benefits. In order to adopt the plan, it's going to go through a public hearing at your local unit of government. County brownfield plans are going to require concurrence by a local unit of government, village, township, city. So it's an open discussion on what's going on. Behind the brownfield plan, there's kind of an implementation process. You're typically going to have developer and reimbursement agreements, so that you're holding a developer to a responsive time frame to do the development in exchange for the public benefit. You might have certain conditions about what that development's supposed to look like based on your negotiations with that developer. How you're going to manage things like tax appeals, dark store issues and things like that kind of get in the way of how this brownfield plan can work. And then the process for reimbursement. Most municipalities, you're not funding this work. The developers are funding this work, and you're just reimbursing them. And you're going to have terms for that reimbursement. You know, one, I'm going to pay for my admin expense first, right off the top. So I want, you know, whatever it is, $1,000 a year, $2,500 a year, 5% of the tax increment. You're going to agree to that in advance. Then I'm going to give you what's available out of each summer and winter tax bill. When you're adopting these plans, there's notices to all the taxing jurisdictions so that they know that this brownfield plan is going in place. That's nice that we notify them, but you can't say no. The statute does not provide an opt-out that other tax increment authorities have. So brownfield plan, once it's kind of agreed upon and the train's rolling down the tracks, everybody's along for the ride. As you can imagine, it means public participation in advance is really important so that we've got everybody on board. We don't want to get to a county commissioner meeting and have people objecting to this thing. So we try to work all those kinks out in advance, what people's expectations are. Timing is critical. We tell people all the time, you want this benefit? That's great. We can make it work for you. Expect a minimum of 60 to 90 days for the process to unfold. Now, that doesn't mean they can't put shovel in the ground or anything like that, but it is not a particularly fast process. Slows down even more if we get the state involved. And let me talk about that just for a minute. When we pay our taxes, not as homeowners, but as businesses, a part of that tax bill is what we call the local taxes. Your ISD, county, city, village, township, fire, 911, senior services, that kind of thing. And then we have what we call the school taxes, which is the state ed, which is a 6 mil tax statewide. And then your school operating millage, typically 18 mils. In order for the developer to capture those 24 mils of school, they have to get state approval, either from the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy for environmental activities, or from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation for non-environmental activities, or both. So if we're going to capture that 24 mils of tax, we're going to bring in those agencies. We're going to have very detailed work plans and intake processes, additional meetings to capture that 24 mils. A brownfield plan at the local level allows all the other local millages to be collected, but not SET and school operating. So you can imagine if you look at, how much your taxation is locally, and some of you probably have pretty low tax rates. Rural communities don't, they're not at, 60 mils total. That 24 mils of school becomes a huge partnership, if you will, a huge piece of participation in the payback of these costs. Otherwise, you're bearing it all on your own. Makes sense? The other thing that is beneficial is you're sitting here right now listening to me talking, going like, I don't know what this guy's talking about. What are these activities? And then it gets all sciencey and engineering-y, and it's like, ugh, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to have to be the one that reviews this stuff and determines, yeah, that's okay, what you're doing, and here's some public dollars to support it. Wouldn't it be nice if experts at the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy looked at plans for you and said, hey, this developer's doing the right kind of cleanup, the things that we expect them to do. Or MEDC looks at it from the perspective of the non-environmental activities. And so that's a nice partner for you on the technical review side. So you have a little bit more assurance that this developer is not taking you for a ride, that we're doing things on the up and up here. That's tax increment financing. Happy to entertain some questions about how that works. It's very complicated. I can show you spreadsheets and all that kind of fun stuff if you're interested. But it is one thing that you really control locally. The other thing that all of you can do as local units of government, not just Brownfield Redevelopment Authorities, is you're all you're eligible grantees for state and federal grants. So Eagle, Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, has a number of programs available to you to help in brownfield redevelopment. Every year they've got a $10 million allocation for grants and loans. They also have a specific program from gasoline taxes that goes to petroleum contaminated sites. So those two programs provide grants and loans to local units of government to support redevelopment of a project. One of the nice things about these programs is for every dollar that you spend on true environmental cleanup stuff, they'll give you another dollar to go towards demolition and asbestos, which that's a huge benefit because we hear it time and time again how much demolition cost and how sometimes that even outweighs the cost of the environmental remedies that are needed. Van Buren County has been a recipient of EPA dollars. We are watching closely on the future. They're rolling out from the public infrastructure bill. Brownfield funding went from roughly, $70 million a year to like $500 million a year for the next 5 years. It's an enormous amount of money that's going to go towards brownfield redevelopment, and in bigger chunks of money than they've ever had before. But let's say you don't want a grant or that's not what you want. Maybe you even own some property as a local unit of government. You think it was an old gas station or something. You kind of like, oh, I'd sure like to know what's going on there. We sure would like to market that thing, get it back on the tax rolls. The state of Michigan has programs that come in and do that work for you at no cost. There's a program, this ISID program, where they actually contract with different consultants. Envirologic is one of those consultants that does work. So you fill out an application, you get free environmental work. Or they can come in and do the work themselves and self-perform that work. Now, there's a limit to how many of these sites they can do each year. It's not a huge bucket of money. But, we help communities all the time. It's kind of poaches our own business model a little bit. But, there are situations where maybe you're not in a great hurry, and letting the state do that work at no cost is a nice way of just starting the process on that. And so we can connect you to those programs. Whew. Let's give you a story. That's how we learn this stuff, right? So Marine City, Michigan, south of Port Huron, a little bit, right on the St. Clair River. Over to the left is an old auto dealership. Mr. Terhune was the owner. He was about 90 years old when we did this project, and he was still working on cars every day. And he was like, I'm ready to retire. And we were like, we're going to help you. He wanted something to happen to this property, but it just didn't work anymore as an auto dealership. It wasn't really in the right spot. It's literally right downtown. And a couple local entrepreneurs and benefactors in the city desired to put in a boutique hotel with some condos on the third floor. Apparently, it's a big thing if you're in Western Ontario there across the river. You look across on Google Maps, there ain't much in that part of Canada, a lot of farms. So all those Canadians hop on a boat on a Friday night, come into the States, go out to dinner, catch a play at the theater, do some other things, do shopping, stay overnight, spend their Saturday there, go back Saturday night. It's a huge market, apparently. So they wanted to create this hotel as a place for folks to go. Well, Terhune's was an old gas station site at one time. A couple underground storage tanks. They leaked like a sieve. I mean, that was a very polluted site. And we knew it going in. There was some records of some contamination. Developer asked Envirologic to do some kind of advanced probing and looking at doing some sampling. And sure enough, we find a lot of contamination. So we start putting this project together. And how are we going to do that? Well, I told you earlier, we can stack these incentives, and that's what I want to illustrate here. So to combat all these environmental challenges, first thing we did is our county BRA, St. Clair County, had an EPA grant. They used about $18,000 to fund some assessment work and do some advanced planning work. That was great. That led to requesting the state, Eagle, to consider a grant and loan for this project. So we were able to secure initially a grant of $167,000 and a grant for $249,000 to deal with the environmental issues that we knew were pending, mainly pulling these tanks out of the ground and getting rid of a lot of petroleum contaminated soil. That was going to be our primary effort. But remember, that Eagle grant and loan, for every dollar I'm spending hauling away petroleum contaminated dirt, I get $1 to do the demolition and the asbestos abatement. So that was pretty sweet. MEDC, Michigan Economic Development Corporation, they come sniffing around and go, hey, this looks like a cool project. It's right downtown. That's what they like. Multi-story, that's what they like. Mixed use, hotel, condos. So through their community revitalization program, which is kind of a grant loan mix program, they can do all kinds of different things. They're going to add to this stack of capital that can be used to fund the project. The Economic Development Corporation threw 50 grand in for, I think there were some market studies and some other things that they did. And everything's kind of working out. It still wasn't quite there. So they went after a commercial rehab exemption. So Zach, you had mentioned, different tax incentives that we can provide. There's gazillions of them. Industrial facilities taxes for manufacturers, OPRA, obsolete property, probably heard of that. And this commercial rehab is the same kind of thing, where it freezes taxable value at its current level for a period of time. And that has a value to the owner as well. In this case, about $250,000. We also worked with the county to defer their county landfill fees for this project to kind of the back end of payback. That was about $158,000. And then you have, of course, your very traditional lending and equity components to this. And they were significant parts of it too, obviously. You can see owner equity is about 20% of the project here. That's a nice contribution. So this project was about a $4.7 million project. And you can see, a grant is great. That's just free money that was contributed by the state to it. Same with the CRP and the EDC's money. Some of that's a loan, means got to get paid back. So you start putting some of these costs in a brownfield plan. So even though I got a loan from Eagle to fund the demolition and all this soil removals. I put it in the Brownfield plan to reimburse that. So the local unit of government took out the loan. And then I'm telling the local unit of government, you're paying back that loan from the taxes on this property. And that's a risk. So you do a development agreement and you say to the developer, great, I'll do that for you. But if there's a shortfall on any annual basis, you're making it up cash, right? So that you are not taking the primary risk. You're just the vehicle for this incentive to flow. And this brownfield plan in this particular property captures about $468,000 worth of eligible activities, which is about 10% of the project. So you can imagine if you can calculate all this stuff in advance and work with a developer and you go, so I can reimburse you for 10% of this project over 15 years or something like that. It becomes a huge incentive, it just pushes these projects over the edge. If the developer had to pay for another $500,000 worth of environmental activity on their own, where was that money going to come from? And it's going to come out of their own pocket. The equity would have to jump up again. And maybe that's not, I don't have $500,000 sitting in my pockets. So maybe that project doesn't happen. So this is a great way of collaborating, local, state, Brownfield Authority, EDC, all to come together to make this project happen. Briefly want to wrap up with implementation of this plan. Did that all sound really complicated to you? Well, that was the easy part. Okay. Anybody can put a plan together, right? Implementing a plan is a whole other thing. So that's great. We project all these costs, we project the taxable value, and we project the payback schedule for these costs. That's basically what a brownfield plan is doing. Maybe we're sprinkling in some grants and loans and other things to make that work. Well, then the real work happens. That $600,000 or $468,000 worth of eligible activities, that's going to come back to the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority to manage that. And what you're going to get is you're going to get a stack of invoices and receipts and canceled checks. And so here's my $468,000 worth of work that I performed. Now reimburse me for it. And somebody's got to go through those invoices and verify that they're real, right? And that they're not for things that you shouldn't be reimbursing. So you've got all that review reimbursement process. You've got to rely on taxes being paid as normal. As soon as a developer is delinquent in their taxes, that flow has got to be interrupted. You got to make sure that the capture occurs. This is really critical if you're a county Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. The county's not the taxing entity. The villages are, the townships, the cities. And the county Brownfield has to reach out to those little local units of government and go, don't send that off to 911 and the county and the ISD. That money comes to me, the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority. And what we find is we actually have to create these little financial statements with every winter and summer tax bill that goes out and remind them of what we, as the Brownfield Redevelopment Authority, are supposed to get. And remember that little house, the little greenhouse, and its taxable value? It was small, but that tax continues to flow to all the taxing jurisdictions just like it always did. The authority doesn't capture all the taxes, just the new taxes. So we have to help you all understand, no, this much goes to everybody else and this much goes to the Brownfield Authority. Again, that takes time, it's cost, there's people involved. And you got to do that with every tax bill, and you might be doing that for 15, 20 years. Yikes. It's job security for folks like me. If you're an authority that is capturing taxes, there's annual reporting to the state. It's relatively easy, but you got to track that. And then, of course, at some point, you got closeout. The other thing that you got is people want to know, like, is this plan working? Is it getting paid? You know, where do we stand in this thing? This will take them forever to reimburse this guy for what they did. So it's real important that there's communication. And, you know, guess what? Treasurers and assessors and township supervisors, they come and go a little bit, right? And so you get new leadership in that has to be educated on, well, what is this thing that we're doing and carrying on our books? I want to double down on the idea that this is a team sport. It sure is. I've just listed, you know, a handful of folks that kind of pop to mind when you're doing brownfield redevelopment. Of course, you have a developer, business entity. You have your local unit of government leadership, whoever they are. You have your brownfield redevelopment authority. You'd be very smart to involve your finance directors or assessors or both on these, because they're the ones that are kind of keeping the books on this for you. Your economic development agencies are typically part of this. You may have state agencies, Eagle, MEDC, private lenders, engineers and consultants, and construction team. There's a lot of talking going on to make these things happen. And frankly, the more talking there is and the earlier it happens, the better this project comes together. Ooh, wrapping up. This is a very powerful economic development tool. You can use it everywhere. It's not just an environmental program, it's an economic development program. We didn't even really touch on all the neat little things that we can do to be really creative with the use of these tools and some of those specific eligible activities that are on that spreadsheet that I gave to you. It takes a lot of time. If we're going to involve the state, it might be a year. So smart developers are talking to me now about projects that they want to do in 2023. The ones that are talking about, like, I want to break ground in May, you know, like, okay, maybe. So start that talk early. Layer these incentives on top of each other. And what you're doing is you're working on closing that unfunded gap on a project. And it is not inappropriate for you to ask a developer to show that gap. I think that's a legitimate request, and they should be able to demonstrate to you that a gap exists and needs to be filled with these resources. You can ignore that last thing unless you're doing a project in Leelanau County. Sorry about that. So that's my discussion on brownfields, and I will be around for discussions and questions. Unless we have time now, what do you want to do?
Why don't we wait till we wrap up the next session, and then we'll show how they combine together.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
And I just want to reiterate that last point, well, sort of last point he made there on starting early. So a lot of times our local units of government, the cities, the villages, the townships are the first people to get a project in front of them or hear about it or see it. And if you bring your economic development partners in right at the beginning on some of these, it can save a lot of headaches on the end, especially, as he said, some of these can take maybe even a year.